Hey, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Real Talk. I am here with my friend Eddie Valero, and Eddie is our county supervisor right here from Orosi, and he is the county supervisor in Tulare County. He's also the founder and executive director of Young Men's Initiative, and I want to hear some more about that. But Eddie grew up here in Cutler, in Orosi, and went on to Princeton and Georgetown and Cornell and all these places for your education. And today, I'd just kind of like to hear a little bit about your journey and what you're doing as county supervisor and what drives you, what motivates you. Just get to know you a little bit.
Yeah.
So.
Well, no, first I want to say thank you for having me. I'm excited to have a conversation with you, Pastor. I will share that early on, I did go through 3 examples that could have changed the trajectory of my life journey. One being that I was born with glaucoma in my left eye, and I've had 5 major operations since birth. Thankfully, haven't had to have a major operation for about maybe a good 10 years. But leading up to it, I've had 5 major operations. I grew up always being labeled as a scholarship boy, a term that I now dislike because it sets high expectations for our youth. And then lastly, which is most visible, is that I was actually born with the birthmark. And so that growing up was a bit difficult for me, but I grew up in a community that really embraced, accepted me, and supported me through my life journey. So those 3 examples really impacted my upbringing. But I grew up in a home where my family toiled the fields early on in life and decided to make their way to Orosi. They were transient before that in their 20s and finally decided to settle. They worked in the fields knowing that they wanted a better life for themselves and their children. My dad eventually became a foreman at a local ag company here nearby. And then my mom, knowing that she did not want to work in the fields, decided to go into the hair and beautician route. And so then she decided to open up her own a beauty salon. And then eventually, back in 2002, the family decided to open up a restaurant here in Dinuba as well. And so that has been going strong also. And as for me, I knew that early on I wanted to leave the confines of Cutler Orosi, and I told myself that I would never return once I graduated from high school. But obviously that's not the case now. But for me, I was always academically driven, knowing that even though there weren't many opportunities available for me in the community of Cutler Orosi, I had the exposure and the opportunity to leave the confines early on in my young age. For example, I went off to Yale University in between my sophomore and junior year of high school. That was an opportunity that was afforded to me through a program where I was able to take 4 classes there. Decided to come back after I did that program and went to UCLA and did a program at Law Institute there as well, all while I was in high school. Graduated a year early from high school, then went off to Cornell University, studying city and regional planning as well as law and society. And while I was at Cornell, I did another program at Princeton University through the Woodrow Wilson School, and then graduated Cornell. Then went off to Georgetown University, where I took graduate coursework in conflict resolution. Decided to come back home, reevaluate my situation, and then applied for PhD programs at different universities and decided to go back to Cornell and do a doctorate in learning, teaching, social policy. It was in graduate school where I realized that I was in a different direction, that I was in a different calling, that was my own calling and not the calling that God had for me. And the reason why I say that is because I was 2 chapters away from my dissertation. And so I could have easily just become Dr. Eddie Valero. I remember late one night being at Planet Fitness in the mall in Ithaca, New York at 10:30 at night. And God said, Eddie, pack up your bags and head back home. And I was like, what the heck? What's going on?
Yeah, right.
But this thing in my heart kept on saying, Eddie, go back home. Eddie, go back home. And it kept on constantly as a reminder. And there were instances I remember when I was with colleagues and stuff at a coffee shop, and they would say, Eddie, you're the type that's going to go back home, right? And you're going to do this or do that. And I'm like, no, I actually want to become a professor, teach in Texas and write books and teach classes. And that's it. I don't want to get involved in politics. I don't want to get involved in anything that has to do with community. But that kept on coming back to me. Go back home. Go back home. And so sure enough, I went to my mentor one night one day, and I said, I'm leaving. And she's like, you only have 2 chapters left. And I said, yeah, well, my heart is telling me that I need to be back home. So I did. I packed up my bags and came home, and the rest is history.
Wow. So I want to back up a minute because that's a huge journey. But going to the most basic of this and the beginning of this, I what I'm hearing is there was this drive to go, to get out of here, go do something with your life. What created that dynamic, that escape mentality of I want out of here, or maybe it was an escape. Maybe it was I'm too big for this area. I just don't have. I don't want that small town anymore. Because there's a lot of kids growing up in Cutler, Rossi, Orange Cove, Dinuba, Reedley, that are like, okay, I'm going to grow up in the small town, and as soon as I'm out of high school, I am out of here. I'm going to go do something with my life. I'm not going to be trapped. They don't see the opportunities. They don't see where this could go anywhere. And so I've often said one of the difficulties of the small towns is we lose our great talent. Because they leave and they don't come back. So talk to me a little bit about how that mindset developed. Was it always there when you were 5, 6, 8, 10? Or at what point did you start feeling like I got to get out of here? I want to leave and never come back. Okay. And why was that?
Well, I will preface it by saying that now I believe there are plenty of opportunities for youth and students to get involved in community programming, a lot of CTE, college technical education programs out there for kids. But growing up, that was very limited for me.
Sure.
I only had maybe 2 AP classes at Rossi High School. Now there are plenty of AP classes. So I felt like I had to create opportunities where there were none. And I had to really go after those opportunities outside of Cutler Rossi, i.e. going to Yale, UCLA, and all these other programs and opportunities. And so
I'm sorry. Let me ask this. How did you find out about that opportunity in Yale? Because, most kids that are growing up around here, they're not, they don't know where to search. And frankly, unfortunately, sometimes the counselors aren't really at the schools, aren't really locked into that kind of thing. You know what I mean?
And especially given the fact with a lot of mental health issues going on in our world today, counselors, even though they're academic counselors, sometimes they're pushed and having to deal with the person and not necessarily being able to go the academic route. So I think a lot has changed during that time with our counselors and their roles and responsibilities being put on the side in order to remedy the situations that are going on now. But I will share with you, going back to my experience like at Yale University. So I remember vividly one day at mock trial practice, there was a teacher who will remain nameless, and because I was always a go-getter, I was always active in high school. But he had a flyer with him, and that flyer was actually for another student. And I overheard him tell the student, "Hey, look at this opportunity. I think it would be a great opportunity for you." And
so it wasn't even presented to you. It was
to another student.
Wow.
And so the student said, "No, I'm not interested at this time. I'm not going to go anywhere." And so the teacher decided to throw that flyer in the trash. Well, then the group goes into the next room for practice, and I stay behind, and I end up picking up that flyer from the trash, and then I go to a teacher next door, and she helps me apply for that program. And to this day, I still remember that the teacher who initially proposed that program for the other student was very upset that I followed through with it by selling tamales during the holidays, waters at graduation, and I even received a note in the mail, and to this day, I believe it's from the teacher's wife,
wow,
who basically said, "If you do not have the money to attend, then why are you even applying?" So that was a motivating factor for me still. I could have easily gotten discouraged and said, "You know what? Okay, I don't have the money, but I worked really hard at getting where I needed to be." And so then, yes, I ended up going to Yale and taking these 4 classes. And it was there that I really understood the haves and have-nots in our communities. I will share that I was also presented with an opportunity while I was at Yale. A good colleague of mine, her dad was the admissions director for Andover Academy. And many times people don't know, like in these smaller towns, that there are boarding schools for high school boarding schools throughout the country that are top 10 in the country: Exeter, Deerfield, Andover Academies. And so the friend of mine that I got to really connect with said, "Hey, apply for your last 2 years of high school over at Andover, the #1 high school in the country.
Wow.
My dad can get you in, and you'll just finish your 2 rest of years at high school there." And so I came back home, gave the application to my parents. They laughed and they threw it in the trash. And so obviously, knowing that I wasn't going to go to a boarding school like Andover, but instead had to make do with what I had here in Cutler, Orosi, Dinuba. And so, and like I said, I don't have any grudges towards that. I don't, because we're planted where we're at, and we just need to grow where we're at and really take that journey and see where it takes us as well.
Wow, that's amazing. So when you would have gone to one of these boarding schools, obviously there's got to be a cost to that. Do you think your parents were more wrapped around, man, we can't afford this. There's no way that this could happen? Is that kind of where you think that was?
No, I just think it was the fear of long term. I think they're
going away for a summer is one thing.
Going
away for 2 years when you're 15 at the time,
and then potentially not even returning after that,
right?
Because being able to go to college somewhere else. So I think that they wanted to hold on to me as long as they could before allowing me to go off to a university.
Yeah. I totally understand that from a parental standpoint too. So you do this thing called the Young Men's Initiative. Tell me about how that got started and what it's all about.
So as I mentioned, when I returned, I was very mad at God because I knew that I was following him now and I wasn't following my own. It came to a point where I realized that God had said, "Look, I've given you everything that you wanted. You wanted to go off to Rome and study. You studied there. You went off to a prestigious Ivy League institution, several of them, and you got it. You did this, you did that. I've provided." And so it came to a point where God said, "Okay, now it's my turn. My time, my turn." And that's where I realized I got that epiphany by saying, "Okay, I think I have to be ready. So when I came, it wasn't necessarily that God gave me a clear picture as to what I was going to do here, but it just was that feeling and that heart gut wrench that said, Cutler, Rosie, Dinuba, areas where you need to be. And so, like I said, I fought with God. There were many instances in which I actually wanted to give up, but it wasn't until he really placed me in leadership. I got back and began being on the school board for Cutler Rosie Joint Unified, 6 years, 3 years as president. And that is where my leadership began. And again, I will share with you that I was very active throughout high school, student, school board representative, junior class president, did this, did that. But I wanted to leave all that behind because it was exhausting.
Sure.
But I came back to fulfill similar to what I had done in high school. I'm doing it now. And so, but when I was a school board member, I would go to the high school campuses, and one of the questions that I would constantly ask our male students, where's your dad? Where's your dad? And overwhelmingly 90% of those that I asked would say, I don't have a dad. I don't have a dad. Or my dad left us. Or my dad no longer is with us. And so that broke my heart a lot. And then when we had expulsions come to us as board members, we have to review and approve. 99.9% of those expulsions were males. And so I kept on asking the superintendent, where's the dad? Where's the dad? And again, the report would say, no father, no father, no father.
Wow.
And so God placed in my heart, because my heart was broken for these young men, says, in order for me to repair their hearts, I need to repair yours in understanding what they're going through. And so sure enough, I then started getting a group of males together and really having just time to be together on Saturdays. Every other Saturday, we would spend 4 hours from 10 to 2. I would provide brunch in the morning, then lunch. In between, we would have just conversations. I would take them out to the coast because many of these young men did not know what an ocean looked like. And so that became my everyday. That became my opportunity to see me grow at the same time that they were growing themselves. I will share with you that I was penny pinching throughout my entire ministry of Young Men's Initiative. Really hard on me, and knowing that my parents also were very upset that I was doing what I was doing, because they would say, Eddie, you have an Ivy League education. What are you doing here? Why are you doing what you're doing? You're not making money. You're doing. And so it was very frustrating while I'm trying to do heart work, but yet your parents are constantly nagging and saying, get the heck out of here. What are you doing?
Right.
And so it was really hard on me, but I noticed that it was growing and I was being able to mentor. And through the course of 5 to 6 years while YMI was in Cutler Rosie, I mentored over 65 plus fatherless young men. And it was an experience of a lifetime, knowing that I was helping these young men become better fathers. And to this day, when I think back about my own experience going to all these prestigious schools, what I realized it's not so much where you go, it's what you do with what you have. Obviously, the journey for me is because I wanted an Ivy League education and God gave me that opportunity. But I realize now being home that it's what you do with what you have. And so for me, with these young men, now I'm getting calls, Eddie, I'm a dad. Eddie, I'm going to be the best dad that I can.
Yeah, come on.
And then in addition to that, others YMI are saying, look, I got my 4-year college degree. And so for me, I personally don't rank them. I say, look, that's your life experience. Amazing. That's your life experience. Amazing. And so for me, I've learned to value all of these experiences that these young men have been able to go through and see their journey and have them come out as gold. And so for me, I'm very blessed. I have the opportunity now to attend numerous weddings
Sure.
because of these young men calling me up and saying, Eddie, my journey is great. I
That's
know,
awesome.
for example, there's this other young man who I will just share briefly. So his mom died of cancer while he was in high school. The dad had left the family to move to Mexico and start a different family in Mexico. So he was left to stay with his grandma once the mother passed on due to cancer. And he had a sister, so it was them two with the grandma. Well, a few months later, the grandma passes away due to cancer. And so then they're left to stay with the aunt. Well, the aunt was not necessarily a
great
good
influence.
and was taking all of the money from what they were getting and using it for her and not for them. And so then they had to leave and they separated from the aunt and just started living in an apartment together, him and his sister. Thankfully, once he graduated from high school, he started working at Olive Garden as a waiter. We also took him in at a restaurant and he was working as a waiter at me and Martha's. And just recently I ran into him again and he said, I'm doing well. I'm in a program, the air conditioner. Yes, and he's HVAC.
Yeah.
He's doing well, making great money.
Oh man,
in a
that's
program
fantastic.
and doing great with himself. Now is living independently. And so he's doing great. And it's those examples, those models that we hope that the program really helped initiate that spark. I will share with you that now we've taken YMI to a county-wide level. We recently held a summit called Fathering the Fatherless. And so we were able to do a summit. During COVID, we actually did a virtual online conference that is available on YouTube, really just talking about how we can better the lives of our young men. And we had a panel discussion as well as a keynote speaker. And then we're also working on establishing yes camps. And so yes camps go to the various school districts and they do half of their programming academic. So kind of just having them through do education components. And then the second half is life skills. Because as you know, we're really lacking in bringing back our life skills, like our banking and making sure you're financially healthy and making sure that you're eating well and making sure that you know how to change a tire, making sure that you know how to do things around the home and in life that will set you up for greatness.
And so Young Men's Initiative is doing all of that as well.
So it's branched into a new nonprofit, which is called Fathering the Fatherless.
Okay. So is Young Men's Initiative no longer?
So I moved over to the county, I decided to transition my efforts and energy into county-wide efforts of different programming responsibilities and trying to supervise $1.6 billion for the county. And so it took a little toil on me, but I was able to identify 2 male leaders that were able to take on this role to a much greater scale, which is now Fathering the Fatherless. So I would say that YMI morphed into FTF.
Okay. So when you say fathering the fatherless, is this for young men and young ladies?
Young men.
Just young men?
Yes.
Okay. Well, and I would say that is the greatest need in the fact that while a young lady growing up without a father, it affects her differently, usually looking for love in the wrong places, which that's a whole other story. But the young men, all their identity comes from a male role model, everything. And if they don't have that, they're out searching. And so gang leaders and others that are out there, drug dealers, whatever it is, begin to take them in and groom them and bring them alongside in that life.
Yeah.
And we know where that life ends.
Yeah.
And so it's a huge problem in this area, and I see it really all over America. I've traveled, several states even recently, and everywhere you go, this is a big problem. Living in a fatherless generation. I want to actually one of these days maybe have you back and talk to you a little bit and drill down on that one topic, because that's absolutely huge.
Yeah.
But going back to with yourself, I understand how all of that got started, but now you're here and you're not really making any money to speak of by that time. And you've got this great program and ministry that's really what it is.
Yeah.
That's started. But how did you finally come to a place that you said, okay, all this degree, everything that I've studied, I can use that for bettering and doing more? Because I'm assuming that was your drive.
Yeah.
Of saying, I mean, how instead of assuming, I should probably just ask, how did that lead to being a county supervisor?
Yeah. Well, when I reflect back on the last, I would say, 8-9 years of being back, I think the one thing that is a constant reminder is God was, are you going to be faithful? Are you going to stay the course? Are you going to be committed? Are you going to be engaged? And there were many times, obviously, where I was wondering, can I commit? Can I commit to this journey that you have me, Lord? Because again, who would have thought a young scholarship boy mentoring fatherless young men? Never in a million years did I ever think that I would be doing this, but it was God, not me. And he needed a vessel in order to make that happen, and I did so willingly. And again, it was that pivotal moment where God reminded me again, I've given you everything you've wanted, Eddie, and I need you to surrender and give everything now to me. And so that was where I just like, wow, that broke me. But knowing that I was going to be built back up as the seasons changed in my life, being here and home. And I will just share that same tug in my heart that I got when I was in Ithaca, New York at the gym was the same tug in my heart that I got when I made that transition from school board to county supervisor. Initially, again, never thought that I would be a county supervisor coming back. That wasn't my intentions at all either. But I put my hat in the ring because of that same heart tug that I got from God. And I will just share, it wasn't easy.
No.
It was very...
I remember those days.
Yes.
I remember you and I had multiple conversations because of my background in being on city council and being the mayor of Dinuba. You and I had some very candid conversations. And even after you got elected at county supervisor, then it was almost like feeling like you were Daniel in the lion's den, wasn't it? I mean, you really had to acclimate to a whole new way of life and the way things are run. I remember when I went on in a small scale, when I went on city council, it took me, and this blew me away when I recently, back a few years ago, saw a newly elected person to city council, had never been on city council, decided to throw their name in the hat to be the mayor. And they were just starting on city council. And I sat in the audience laughing. I literally laughed out loud, and I had to stop myself because you have no idea. You don't even know how to read the budget and where the money is going and all these different funds and different things. You don't even understand why you're here. You think you know, But then when you get there, the harsh reality and the grind of how long it takes to get something done, and get it approved. I mean, roadways coming into your community or just repairs and all the complexities of that with Caltran. And then you've got the federal government, the state government, the county government, and the city government. And you realize you're way down here, right? And to get anything achieved, and then your colleagues have to get on board with what you're trying to get accomplished. So I know the learning curve had to be huge. What were some of the challenges in coming into that? Am I sort of on target there?
It's extremely different in dealing with different entities and agencies in order to get things done, as you mentioned. But if I'll just share really kind of the transition was that, so I was frustrated during the entire election process. And I said, God, you're putting me through this ringer. No interest, but yet you're telling me that this is something that I need to do. So again, I had those fights with God, and I remember vividly one night as I was driving home from a campaign panel of elected. It was the federal and the state, so it wasn't local. It was just in terms of a town hall, and so I remember driving home, and this was a week prior to the primary election in June.
Okay.
And I was bawling. I was just crying from Visalia to Orosi. And I was like, God, why do you have me here? Like, am I going to win? Am I going to lose? Like, what is this? And so I just remember as I was driving home, I turned on the radio, and it was Pastor Rick Warren. And he had mentioned about pregnancy and the stages of pregnancy and how we always want to know the end result. But yet the middle part is the most exciting part because it's the unknown. And so we have to be okay with the unknown. But then I also got a vision of me being in the county chambers, getting the oath of office done. And so for me, it was already an image that he had implanted on me.
Wow, that is so cool.
And in January, it was one of those things where you get kind of shaken up because it's the exact same image that he had given you months prior. And to be able to realize that and to know, wow, this is the exact image that God had given me months prior, and not even knowing whether or not I was going to be elected.
Yeah.
And so that was the confirmation for me, at least from God, saying, just stick the course, stay the journey. And so those have been instances in which I've been so thankful for God for giving me the opportunity to know when my seasons are changing, to know when I'm going from one season to another season. And so I've been very privy to that, and I'm thankful that God has given me that blessing. And hence why I decided, like, I was early on thinking, okay, maybe just one term and I can go back and do the YMI and the FTF thing that I'm so passionate about. But just recently, again, God gave that tug in my heart and said, another term, obviously still having to run an election to know whether or not I will. But again, it's his will be done, not mine. And so, and I've noticed that I'm in a, how would I say, on a roller coaster ride. And even though there are ups and downs, there's highs and lows, valleys and mountains, it's been exciting nonetheless. And so I know that, for example, as redistricting happens and changing the lines for who's going to run for what positions, it's all, if you're a government junkie like I am, it's very exciting times right now because new lines are being drawn. And I have been asked by several colleagues to consider running for, like, say, the state assembly. And I have said, no, my commitment is to the county.
To the local,
is to the local. And I feel like there's so much work that still needs to be done. And so if God gives me that opportunity for a second term, then obviously I will continue to do the work that needs to get done at the county. But jumping into the county itself, We are charged with overseeing a budget of $1.6 billion into our 20 plus departments throughout the county. What many people often think is that we're separate from the state, but we're an extension from the state. And so those funds that come down from the state or the federal, we then implement them locally in our communities, especially unincorporated communities, but we work with the cities as well to really make sure that projects are getting done across the entire region. And so there have been times where I have been frustrated with the state and the federal, but knowing that we also have to be fiscally prudent, it's hard for us because we're caught between a rock and a hard place. Do we lose funding and go one direction, or do we take those funds to support the programming that needs to happen in order to continue moving forward?
Gotcha.
So those are kind of the challenges that we've been faced with recently. I know that God continues to prepare me to different levels of leadership, which has been hard, but it feels like I'm learning as I go as well. So not only was it very difficult in learning the systems of a county government versus a school board government, but tackle that on with then COVID. Then the fires, SQF fire complex.
Right.
Then you have the redistricting process that took a great while in order to comply with the Voting Rights Act.
How long have you been on county supervisor?
3 years going on 4.
3 years. Okay, so next year is the election.
Correct.
For the next. Okay.
Yeah.
And you are running again.
So yes, I have decided through prayer and petition and understanding, okay, is this my season to kind of get out of politics or to continue in that? And so for me, I always consider myself a servant leader, and so making sure that work is getting done for the people of this community. I will share with you, and this is something that I haven't really shared often, but once I found out that I had been elected in the primary, so I didn't have to do a general election, on my birthday, I decided that I would go to every single community that I was going to represent, and I prayed over every single community. I started at about 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning, and it went to about 2 o'clock p.m. And I invited some of my family as well as cousins, and we just came together as a group, and we prayed over every single one of those communities. And it's just so amazing to see the fruits of that labor. Because as we know, the harvest is plentiful, but the harvesters are few.
Yes.
And so for me, God has given me that opportunity to be that harvester. And that was placed in my heart early on, is that once I was elected to go and pray over all of these different communities, well, just within these past 3 years, I've seen so much that God has done in these respective communities. For example, Yedem and Seville has not had clean drinking water for over 10 years. Well, back in 2020, my second year on the Board of Supervisors, we turned on the tap for Yedem and Seville, and they got new water infrastructure, piping that is being done for the second phase. So Seville already has their clean water. We're piping into Yedem. Yedem will be having clean water hopefully by next year through the second phase. In addition to that, I prayed over Goshen, and as you know, there's a lot of development going on in Goshen. And we prayed for economic development in the community of Goshen along the 99 freeway. And we have now Starbucks, we have the Travel Center Lodge, we're going to get a hotel there, so things are materializing there. And the same thing with East Arosi. We prayed for East Arosi sewer and water systems. The state is now going to be consolidating East Arosi into Arosi's water system. And again, one of the first in this entire state to have a consolidation project happen.
That's fantastic.
So it's all of these things that I'm seeing that we prayed for 3.5 years ago are materializing now because of the faithfulness and prayer that we're able to see in real time now.
I don't know if you realize it, but in the history of Danuba, our foundation is from a group that came over from Goshen.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Back long ago. It's a whole other story, but it's interesting how Goshen became almost like a ghost town place, just not much of anything that has gone on in development there ever in all these years. But Dinuba took off, and there's a whole amazing history that we have here, but that's for another day. I have two more questions. One would be all of the education you received, city planning, all kinds of things. What of the things you learned in university do you use today?
So I would say more so my undergraduate degree training in city and regional planning, but in my graduate work, not a lot. I do with my undergrad because I learned how to build kind of great cities using examples of different cities that have been planned well. Also going out and doing neighborhood planning workshops and stuff. But I would say... and I know that my life could have been different and maybe even could have started earlier in this community by doing what I'm doing now had I probably not gone to graduate school. But again, God was giving me the opportunity to go to graduate school because I wanted to go to graduate school. But I think... so I would say the latter half of my academic experience I'm not using. But the early stage of undergraduate degree, yes.
Do you ever see yourself using what you got at graduate school?
I would say that the most impact that I've received thus far has been the work that I've done in community.
Yeah.
That has been the work that I've done in relationship with others. The work that I've been able to do while in communion and encouraging others as well as them encouraging myself because iron sharpens iron. And so I think it's those lived experiences, those tangible, real life opportunities that I've had along my journey that has gotten me to where I am today. There's so much to be said about the books in terms of being book smart. And again, going back to my scholarship boy experiences. But I've learned that it's in community that really helps you build and develop and become courageous. I will just share that also being involved and going to service on Sundays and even midweek services, because those are the opportunities in which you get fueled. Those are the opportunities in which you get hungry and ready, and knowing that there's still so much more to be done. And when you're being led by your local pastor, that is what gives people the impetus to keep on going as well.
Yeah.
It's the juice. It's the It's the excitement that one gets. I know that we're living in a broken world. I know that the world has been changing drastically these past few years, and there's a lot of unknown. But when you're established in the local church, the opportunities grow immensely, and you don't have to fear. It's more of okay, let's get recharged and let's go back out into the world and let's be the light that we need to be. Let's be the salt and the light. And so that's why I'm so thankful that we have pastors in our communities that really are feeding us and helping us to go back out into the world to be those courageous people.
Right. That is so awesome. And we didn't even get into really your whole faith journey and your walk with Jesus. I mean, well, let's just take a minute. I mean, at what point in your life did you come to the Lord? Were you raised in the church? Were you?
So I was raised in the church. I actually was raised Catholic.
Okay.
And so I was in the church 4 days out of the week. I was an altar boy. I was in the choir. I was in youth group.
Wow.
So you name it, I was in church 4 days out of the week, even more than my own parents.
Yeah.
And so then I went on to undergraduate, and when you go to college, you often then begin to question, you begin to wonder, and then but still I had that faith in me regardless. And so, but it wasn't until I went into graduate school where then I started partying. I kind of, my self-worth kind of was shaken a little bit going out, and I will confess, yes, there was some drinking that happened several times, especially with the intense pressure of a PhD as well. But it wasn't until I started knowing that had I continued down the route of graduate school, that there might have not even been a PhD, because I probably would have been somewhere else. And so I noticed that when I came back, that's when I really had to really put myself in community and to really change my ways. And I felt like God was going to do that because I was committing myself and I was surrendering myself to changing, because again, I had already been given everything that I wanted from God, and now it was my turn to give him back.
How did you make this shift from being being raised Catholic to now you're in a spirit-filled Pentecostal setting? How did that happen?
I share one word, and that is relationship. And I feel like I wanted a stronger relationship. Not to say that in the Catholic faith there isn't relationship. There is. But for me, I felt like in order for me to go deeper in my own walk with Jesus, I had to really find a place and a way in which to do that. I will share with you that I started off, when I did come back, I did go to a church in Visalia. And the same way that God had told me to go from Ithaca here, he made me leave that church to go to a smaller church in Cutler, given the fact that I was living in Cutler, Roseland.
Gotcha.
And so, again, it was just a matter of asking God where and when and why. And so that's what I've kind of realized as well.
Well, I commend you in everything that you're doing, everything that you've done, being about community. I'm so thankful the Lord told you to get home.
Yeah.
Because we need the people like yourself in local community and regional community, making it better.
Yeah.
You know, and so many times, as I said prior to the broadcast, that our talented leave and never come back, and it's so refreshing to hear that. I want to ask you to one final question. What would you say to the young men that are in our schools, junior high, high school, and maybe they have a dad at home, maybe they don't. Not necessarily just young men in general that are saying, I got to get out of here. There's nothing here for me. I have no idea what I want to do in life. They're confused. They don't know. They give them some direction.
Yeah. Well, I will just share that you have that example here at Living Word. And I will share that there is a Weihmeyer that went through my program, worked at the cafe, and but he was going through a lot.
Wow.
Mentally, physically. He would come into Weihmeyer, Eddie, I need help. Eddie, I need support. Now I see him, and he has changed dramatically.
Wow.
Although I know that there's still work to be done.
Sure.
But I have seen a complete transformation. And I just actually ran into him last week at Walmart. I said, you are like, you're different.
Yeah.
And I said, and I'm so thankful that you are committed to Living Word. I said, because he had actually had attended the church that I was at. And I was like, you are awesome. I said, you have changed dramatically, and I'm so glad that you're plugged into Living Word, and that I see a whole new you. I know that we're still there's still work,
sure.
But you, like, your heart has been renewed. Your love for God is evident. I know that you're still hungry, and so it's individuals like that there's still hope, that there's still a space, that there's still a place for those that are seeking, for those that may feel lost, that for those that want to leave. Sometimes you just have to tap into those resources of living water that are already here. And but it's also our responsibility as people within the community that have done it, that have and that have been planted for some time now, and to bring them in, or to encourage them to go somewhere and seek that out, because there are willing vessels here to take on others, to be filled. And so we just need to really make sure that we're connecting. We're connecting the dots, connecting the harvesters and the harvest, in order to make sure that no one leaves this area empty. And if it is to the point where you have to go somewhere in order to really learn, grow, and go, but making sure that your home here is always going to welcome you back with open arms, just like it did for me. Because for me, at least, I knew that Cutler Rosie believed in me before I believed in myself. And so I feel like for all those young men that are out there as well, your community believes in you before you've believed in yourself.
That's so good.
And we just need to make sure that we instill that in them, in their broken hearts, so they begin to be renewed and fulfilled, in order to have them keep going, because we have to break the cycle of a fatherless generation.
Awesome. Eddie, I've enjoyed this time together. We have to have you back, because I want to drill down on some other things that we didn't get to, but been a great time visiting with you.
Thank you.
And wish you all the best in the upcoming, and all the directions for your life and where it goes. And I'll just say this, whatever the outcome next November or whenever that is, I got a feeling you're going to go on and do some great things.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
God bless.